Good afternoon, everyone. Ristico Evangel, are we prepared to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're good to go.
All right. With that, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Development Permit Panel meeting of Wednesday, May 29th. On the panel today, you have myself, Wayne Craig, General Manager of Planning and Development, Cecilia Shem, General Manager of Community Safety, and James Cooper, Director of Building Approvals. We also have associated city staff here to support us today, Josh Reese and Kevin Ing. The panel deals with matters of form and character, things such as landscaping, exterior lighting, architecture, parking. The panel does not deal with land use or density, as those terms are established through the zoning process by City Council. Today on the agenda, we have one item. Before we get to that, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the Development Permit Panel meeting held on May 15th? So moved. Motion to adopt those meeting minutes? Approved. Thank you. We'll now go to the first item on the agenda. The applicant is Arcadis Architects Canada, Inc. The project address is 9520 Beckwith Road. The purpose of the application is that a development permit be issued at 9520 Beckwith Road to permit the construction of a 7-story light industrial and office building on a site zoned light industrial and office ZI 19 Bridgeport Village City Center. Over to the applicant team, if you could introduce yourself and let us know who will be presenting today. Thank you.
So I'm Gwyn Vose, architect with Arcadis, and with me is Salim Narayanan, Roman, and Anna, and also VDZ, our landscape architects. I will be presenting today with my second screen that says Arcadis Architects, Gwyn Vose.
All right, go ahead and share your screen and walk us through your presentation.
Okay, just let me know when the screen is showing on your end.
You're good.
Okay. So we're speaking today about the Office 2 here in this corner of the site. This has gone to development panel one time previously and was given the green light at that time. It is now coming back again. And the other phases that you can see on the screen are either built or under construction. So this is the final phase of this development. Take note of the ESA area here, which we'll speak to shortly. So as noted, the business center is built at this point, and the others are under construction. And up here, Office 2 is what we're discussing today, with a portion of land on the built site where there's some surface parking and some accessible stalls, which you can see here in red, and a shared WV17 loading space, which are on the sites adjacent to the site in question that are used by it through covenants. The building itself is clean and modern and simple. We'll go through the plans in a moment, but basically there's office at grade, 2 levels of parking above, and then further office above that. So the ground level, it's office and light industrial, as you can see in the plan, on the ground floor, as well as a parking access where you drive in and drive up to the levels above, as you can see in the section. There's the light industrial on 2 levels, parking on 2 levels, and office on 3. The parking is skinned by a decorative facade. The first 2 levels have the vertical elements on that fenestration, and on the part that's facing the neighbor, there's a highly decorated wall, which hasn't changed since the last time that we met. Some quick views in AXO of the project, showing the roof deck of the office, the general sculpting of the building, and the various uses within. Some elevation views and some perspectives, where here you can see the landscape, which we'll talk about in a moment, has various street trees, as well as the ESA space, which will be discussed in a moment as well. Some views of the physical model. And finally to VDC, and where the landscape will be further discussed.
I think we're first going to hear a little bit from our environmental professional.
Yeah.
Very good. My name.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Go ahead.
My name is Jeremy Nilsson. Sorry, just getting some feedback here. I think we're good now. My name is Jeremy Nilsson. I'm a registered professional biologist with Keystone Environmental. We've been providing qualified environmental professional services to this project for several years now. Our scope has been specifically to do with the environmentally sensitive area, as indicated in the approximate center of the figure currently on the screen. Just as a quick recap for all involved, this environmentally sensitive area straddles the shared property line with the Hotel 1 site to the south, so it is partially within each of the two properties. Previously, at the time of the original permitting for these projects, this environmentally sensitive area, which included trees, was identified as requiring protection through the development permitting process. Subsequently, in part due to some changes within both the Office 2 and Hotel 1 site, the trees in the environmentally sensitive area degraded and eventually died. This was attributed to retention of water within the ESA, as well as possibly also soil compaction and associated root damage. With regard to the Hotel 1 site, a general compliance process was previously completed, in which the consultant team worked closely with peers at the City of Richmond to come up with a enhancement plan that addressed the impacts both to the physical area of the ESA as well as the broader sorry, got a change on the screen here. The physical impacts to the environmentally sensitive area, as well as the broader impacts to the local environmental values, for instance, wildlife habitat for the local bird community, small mammals, etc. The proposal included regrading and revegetating the environmentally sensitive area, as well as incorporating native trees throughout the landscaping in the rest of the site, upsizing the trees, or at least a significant portion of them, beyond the typical size requirements of the City of Richmond, and developing a long-term maintenance and monitoring program to ensure that these measures would be effective and that the impacts to environmental values would be addressed. I think that's all for environmental for now, and I'm free to answer questions later.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. So I'll follow up on that and zoom into our site a little bit. Staying here, on this plan, you can see all of the trees in red. And so, as Jeremy mentioned, 22 of the ESA trees are lost. As part of that general compliance application, we worked with city staff to develop appropriate levels of compensation. And so that led to 37 replacement trees across these sites. And so those additional trees you can see in red, they're in the ESA area, which is bubbled, but that site wasn't big enough to apply all of these trees to the site. And so we've mixed them across the hotel sites, and there's a couple along the frontage of the office site as well. And so all these trees, as mentioned, were upsized. These replacement trees are upsized. So if they're a conifer tree, they're 4 meters tall, and if a deciduous tree, they're 10 centimeters diameter. And so on the Jow Street site, the hotel site, it received 23 replacement trees, and the office site received an additional 14 replacement trees. I think we can skip across to the next page here. So focusing in on the actual office site. Sorry, it's flipped a bit now. North is to the right. You can see we've added the compensation trees in the ESA space to the left here. There was an additional 5 wildlife trees. So those are trees that the trunks are still existing with the hopes of different birds and animal species taking up home and finding other uses for them. And then you can see the 2 trees along the frontage that we added. In addition, with ESA comes all of the shrub planting, and so we have a shrub plan here with native species. The trees and shrubs and all these on these plans are intended to be appropriate for sort of changing climate, and so you'll see a shore pine. Pine trees are, as things get a bit drier and hotter, in the tree schedule as well, but it is a local tree. I think we can move to the different levels now. The level 5, 6, and 7 all have planting, and they all have native plantings, so they all have an ESA quality to them. It's a little non-traditional, but basically providing more of the local native species on the rooftops. And so there's a total of 21 trees. These are vine maples, which are a native tree, and you can see that on these 2 plants here. And shifting to the next plan, this is the shrub plans. And so these trees existed on the original plans, having trees on the upper levels. And so, but just making sure that their ESA quality is that improvement that we made to try to bolster the site. And let me just see if there's anything else to mention here. I think that covers it right now. And we'll just wait for more questions.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. You can stop sharing screen.
Great.
Any staff comments, Mr. Reese or Mr. Ng?
Thanks, Mr. Craig. This just a couple of comments. This DP application ultimately updates the ESA compensation strategy for the subject site. The compensation area does not change in size. The revisions to the ESA area on site, as indicated by the project's QEP, does include the replanting of 14 replacement trees in the subject in the ESA area, all of which have been upsized. The compensation is of an equivalent function and biodiversity value to the previous endorsed scheme presented to the panel back in 2019. And there is no change to the building design or form. The building is capable of connecting to the city's DEU system, and they are required to also meet the Step 3 of the BC Energy Step Code, as well as the National Energy Code of Canada. There is a servicing agreement also associated with this project that is required prior to rezoning bylaw adoption that includes frontage works and tie-ins to existing works east of the subject property, as well as water and storm upgrades along Beckwith and appropriate utility connections. I should also note that there is a 5-year monitoring period associated with the ESA compensation.
Thanks for that. Any questions from the panel members for the applicant?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. And one comment, it is disappointing that the trees that were to be retained did not survive. It seems to be partially due to lack of full care on site, so that's rather disappointing. I'm at least glad to see that the size of the trees have been upsized and there's a 5-year period to get them established. Mr. Reese, that is longer than our normal period for having the applicant to be responsible. Is that correct? I seem to recall usually 3 years.
Through the chair, yes. We do typically retain anywhere between 3 to 5 years on these types of compensation.
And what is the letter of credit? What is the letter of credit for if it doesn't work and we have to replace them?
Yeah, do you have that?
Yeah. Through the chair, in response to Ms. Eshim's question, 2 letter of credit or performance measures are being secured for the landscaping. 1 landscaping bond in the approximate amount of $110,000 is being secured for the ESA compensation plantings, and an additional landscape bond in the approximate amount of $260,000 is being secured for remaining all other landscaping. The reasons for providing 2 separate landscaping bonds is the ESA landscaping will require longer monitoring, so it's appropriate to secure a separate landscaping security for that purposes.
Thank you. And I assume the 5-year includes the level 6 and 7, the roof planting as well?
Yes, it covers all areas of the ESA compensation.
Okay. And I also note on the landscape drawings, the street trees is to be determined. I assume that's going to be worked out as part of the servicing agreement with engineering, correct?
That's correct.
And if staff could take it into advisement to make sure that we plant, good-sized trees for those ones as well, if it can be accommodated.
We'll take that under advisement.
Thank you. No further question, Mr. Chair.
James, you're on mute.
My apologies. Mr. Chair, just a few questions. There was a mention that there's 3 wildlife trees. Are they existing on site at present, and are they protected?
The wildlife trees represent trees that were located within the ESA that have since declined and died. All those trees are still present on site, and select ones have been identified as being suitable for conversion into wildlife trees, such that they will be topped to a safe height and then allowed to further decay while providing habitat values to the local plant and small mammal communities.
Okay, so those are... Okay, so there'd be precautions there that in a windstorm they would not present a hazard to this urban site?
That is correct.
And aesthetically, the landscape architect is okay with this? So it's part of a design, or is it part of...
Yes, through the chair. Yes, we're okay with that. Any opportunity to enhance an environmental area, we'll take that. And wildlife trees is one method that we use quite often, as it provides a lot of benefits for birds and other animals.
Okay, and represented in your drawing, they're the larger items or larger tree items that are not in red, but they're in black. Is that correct? So I'm looking at the landscape drawing here, and the one that is there are 3 trees in the ESA protected area. There's 1, 2, 3 of them beside the walkway or beside the path to the parkade. Are those the wildlife trees as identified? They're outside the red cloud.
Through the chair, perhaps I can clarify for Mr. Cooper. I think that the 3 trees in black that are being referenced by Mr. Cooper, those are just additional compensation plantings being provided for in the ESA. In terms of wildlife habitat trees, the QEP and the landscape team have identified a total of 5 habitat trees to be retained. In terms of their location on the subject site at 9520, only one of those wildlife trees are situated technically on 9520. The remaining 4 habitat trees are situated on the neighboring site to the south. But the combined area, the total 5, are generally all contained within the ESA area that straddles the 2 properties.
Okay, so I thank you very much for the clarification. So in terms of that area, that protected ESA area, is it currently, there's tree barricades right now. There is construction on the site. Maybe we can have an elaboration on how that area will be protected throughout the construction, and I assume there will be excavation as well. Going down some form of excavation for foundations, and is there a design for the process of tree protection and during that in that ESA area during construction?
Correct. Currently, there is tree protection fencing, 2x4 framing with high visibility snow fence mesh over top around the perimeter of the entire environmentally sensitive area. I inspected it approximately a month ago. The fencing is in good condition. There were not any indicators of any encroachment, accidental or intentional, into the ESA. No storage of materials, accidental discharge or deposition of deleterious substances, etc. Active construction works are, as identified, currently occurring in proximity to the ESA and have been for some time. So currently the measures appear to be functional and effective at preventing any accidental encroachment now or into the future. With regard to excavation, as unfortunately the mature trees within the ESA have since died, we do not I'd invite Glenn from VDZ to speak on this further, but my understanding is there are not concerns regarding, for instance, accidental damage to roots outside of the ESA or anything like that that would compromise conditions within the ESA. Once the enhancement works within the ESA, so the soil works, regrading, new plantings, conversion to wildlife trees, etc., that are prescribed to occur, the protective fencing will remain in place as long as any adjacent construction activity is occurring. The ESA will be subject to regular inspections as part of the maintenance and monitoring requirements, which have been defined in a memorandum that has been submitted to the city. There will be annual reporting as to the effectiveness of these measures, and that reporting will also contain any adaptive management measures or recommendations for updates to the program to ensure adequate protection remains in place.
Thank you very much. Just one last question. This one is to the staff. Will the establishment and the completion of the ESA planting areas, are they prerequisites for occupancy approval for the office tower?
Through the chair to Mr. Cooper, prior to occupancy and as part of the development considerations, all landscape works, including the works conducted within the ESA, will be required to have been installed and completed, complete with certificates provided by the landscape architect certifying such.
Thank you. No further comments.
Thanks. Just a couple questions for the project team. I'm wondering if you can speak to the intent of the habitat created, both at the ground plane and on the building, and how these relate to each other.
Pass it on to Salim.
Sorry, did you say myself here?
Or Salim, do you want to speak to it? Or actually, perhaps you would speak best, Travis.
I mean, and maybe Jeremy wants to add to this as well, but with any ESA planting, we try to just provide a mix of plants that will provide a varied level of sort of height gradation on the ground level so that it attracts different types of species that birds, bees, and other animals provide shelter, habitat, and other things like that. And there's a mix of plants. So we have red twig dogwood, western sword fern, salmonberry, blue fox, willow, red elderberry, western spirea. So some of these will provide berries, which will be a food source for mostly birds. And so by maintaining these variety of plants and species, the ones that do better can dominate and take over, so that it'll remain a thriving space, despite the fact that it's not really a forest environment yet. And so we tried to provide consistency between the lower and the upper levels. The upper levels require some smaller species since they are on a rooftop. But again, we have, kinnikinick, Oregon grape, again, some fruiting species that will help the birds, and flowering currants. And yeah, so it's a broad approach to providing habitat for the animals that you'll find in the city.
So fair to say that the on building and at grade are complementary to one another?
Yes.
All right. All of these areas will be irrigated, I'm assuming?
Yes.
All right. Maybe this one's for you, Gwyn, but could you speak to the shared arrangements with the adjacent property? You had an image in your presentation previously. I guess what I'm specifically interested in is in terms of the parking and loading, are those shared with the adjacent development, or are they for the exclusive use of this building?
Go ahead, Salim.
Sorry, I couldn't hear it properly, but I believe the question was about the shared vehicle arrangement.
Shared spaces, correct.
Can you go to the site plan, please? So the WB17 loading, which is at the south side of the office one, will be shared between all the 4 buildings. I'm sure you can see my cursor. So this is the W17 space that will be shared between the office one, which is already occupied, and these 2 hotels, and the office 2. And there is also a medium-sized loading in this building, a covered loading space for the building. There are 2 cars here outside of the property line. This is not shared, but this belongs to the 277 Beckwith Road, even though that is within the site boundary of the subdivision of the business center, the first office building. The only vehicles which will be shared will be these 2 car shares here.
All right, thank you for that. In terms of
Answer your question?
Yes, in terms of the WB17 loading space, there'll be some sort of management agreement between all of the buildings to deal with access to that?
That's right. So there is an access agreement for this strip of the lot here, and also for the WB17 between all the 4 buildings.
But in terms of the sharing arrangement, I'm assuming there'll be a private agreement between the 4 buildings to ensure that there's not competing use at the same time?
My apologies, I can't hear you properly.
So the loading space is to be shared between all 4 buildings. I just want to ensure that there will be a operational use agreement between the 4 buildings to ensure that deliveries are sequenced accordingly, so that we don't have 2 vehicles trying to use the space at the same time.
Yes, that will be incorporated into the agreements between all the 4 subdivisions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Evangel, do we have any members of the public here to speak to this item today?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. There is one member of the public that wishes to speak.
All right, Salim or Gwen, if you can stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
My name is Hong Jin. I have a unit in the adjacent building. It's called Bridgeport Business Center. My unit is A30. I am aware of a building project right in front of this building, and according to the billboard, it's a 7-story office building. As an owner of one of the units, we just want to voice our hope about this new project. And this project, as one of the occupants, we would advise that it's not going to be built or modified from more than 7-story, because that was a condition we purchased that unit. And second, I know there is a certain amount of plants growing on top of this building, and just want to make sure that the plants are not overly put or grown on top of the building, because we like the plants, but we don't want to overgrowth of the plants. So those are two of the comments from me. One is the number of stories. According to the plan, 7-story is not going to be modified in the future for more than 7-story. Second is the plans should be modest, not excessive. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Maybe I'll address the first in terms of the stories. This proposal is for 7 stories. Any change to that would require a separate application. Travis, perhaps you could speak to the intensity of the planting on the roof.
Yes, through the chair. The planting on the roof, as I mentioned before, the shrub planting is a smaller quality than what you're finding on the ground, typically 1 to 3 feet tall. And so that will be about the height that you'll see coming over the railings. In terms of the trees, we've opted for a small tree called the vine maple. And so those are much smaller than the other trees you'll see on site, and get about 3 meters tall or so. When they're in full sun, they don't grow as tall. So I don't think they'll seem too substantial. I mean, they'll be nice to be up there, but not overbearing.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from the delegate before we move on?
None, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any letters or public correspondence on this matter?
None, Mr. Chair.
All right. That takes us to panel deliberation. Cecilia, James, any comments?
I have no further comments. My issues with the re-preservation of the ESA has been satisfied.
And my only comment is for staff to make sure that we utilize a 5-year period to make sure that they get well established. It's been done before, but it's slightly unusual to have the ESA compensation on the roof top, so that it cannot be seen by the public. But we want to ensure the productivity of those areas are preserved. So those are my comments.
All right. With that, I'll call for, there is a positive staff recommendation. Does anybody want to move the staff recommendation?
Moved.
So moved.
Seconded then.
Seconded.
All right. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. You've received the endorsement of the panel. This application would proceed to council for consideration once all the conditions are fulfilled. Any
Next.
new business?
None.
All right. The next meeting of the permit panel is Wednesday, June 12th. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.